Alright, so as promised, I found something interesting, and I found a spot that seems like a rather easy incline to get up and get a peek of where this material actually came from. I'm seeing this stump here. Just once upon a time there's an enormous tree there, but so having had some time to spend with this quartz material, there's a lot of iron oxide. I found pockets of it. You could pull it right out. The same materials that the so-called red paint people of Maine would have used for burial sites and that sort of thing. And you can kind of find it everywhere. It's just kind of in its raw form. It's kind of like this reddish powder, and you'll find that these pockets of it within this quartz. You can kind of scoop it out into your fingers and mash it around in your hands. As a matter of fact, you can see I've been playing with it a good deal. So anyhow, I got this light little incline here. I say, even though I'm not necessarily agile, I believe I can get up this thing and find out really where we're looking here. Okay, sure, all right. So as I suspected, it is a farm field. There's looks like a house or a building of sorts. So, clearly when you get into those kinds of situations, you want to respect the landowner's property. You want to take a glance around, see if there's any posted signs, those sorts of things. But that clears up, where this material comes from. We've got a farm field that's clearly been cleared off. It probably has stuff growing at the back of it. It's fairly large. Try to get a peek of it. Just this big old, it's northern Maine, so this big old expansive field out there. You kind of get the picture. And these stones, they're really kind of big. I suspect they were probably, in many cases, pulled or in some way possibly rolled. I see a old wheelbarrow over here, but I'm not convinced that that's what did it. Maybe the smaller stuff, but yeah, it's a fairly steep incline up here where I had started recording. And so I guess, just thinking about it, probably the larger material came intermittently, but you can see that still over time, as they got the field cleared out, the material gradually got smaller. And so if you were, say, bottle hunting or checking for, stuff from like the 1800s, stuff like that, you'd kind of want to stay near where the material's a bit bigger, but at the same time, you'd want to consider how did they travel this property, how did they get around. There's a four-wheeler trail out here. I suspect that was something else first. It's right down there, actually, down at the bottom of this steep incline. Now, you got to figure all this material was, frankly, garbage to people that were trying to, till the land and that sort of thing. Here's a good example right here. Just that red ochre, just this pockets. And a lot of times, you'll break this material out and you'll find pockets of crystals. Actually, I found some earlier. I took some pictures. I'll post them along with it. But, just that powder, this red powder. And this is all very high quality quartz. I mean, really, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, geez, I kind of like that kind of sitting at the end of my driveway or something, very similar. And, it seems to be everywhere and fairly plentiful, I guess. but at the same time, it's kind of nice just to walk up on it. It's a pretty nice piece there. It's all this quartz. So on the Mohs scale, quartz is right around a 9, where a diamond, I guess, is 10 or something to that effect. It's a very dense material. Would have required a good deal of heat. Think of it like a much more dense glass. And in its crystal form, it is exactly like crystal, really. And so as you can see there, veins of material that came through it when it was a liquid being compressed up through the layers. And it's suggested in the state of Maine, maybe this is a good time to bring this topic up. You know, I did some research on the state of Maine's geology for a paper in college. I kind of got pretty involved with it because I was kind of interested in it, so I ended up reading probably a lot more than I needed to. That's a unique piece there. Spent a lot of time looking at, you know, Mount Katahdin as a main feature of my paper, and ended up looking at a number of regions around the mountain. And they talk about, academics describe the impact of an ice age. Okay, so we're all taught that at one time it was simply very cold. They give a reason for it, a meteor, whatever. Got very cold. Ice developed over the state of Maine, and then as it receded, that's what caused it to move all the material and leave behind bedrock in some places and large piles of essentially silt and smaller materials farther down the way. I was very suspect of that right away because I thought about you know, an ice age. It's a block of ice, and if you look at some of the modern glacial melts that we have in the world, there was one that was just spoken about. It went back in the past 50 years or so, quite a ways, and it doesn't do that. Like, it leaves material behind, but it doesn't have that dragging effect. And if anybody's ever stood at the top of Cadillac Mountain and looked down and saw those parallel lines going up the bedrock from the side, I should have got a picture of that. They're very parallel and they're gouges, and they would explain that slowly over time that it was carved. You know, maybe, but I don't think so. I guess I think that is probably, I would lean towards the polar shift concept, that, you know, ice builds up at the poles, sets the balance off on the planet, causing it to flip in some manner, so that, you know, in some descriptions of ancient texts describing the sun rising in the west rather than the east. So, you know, when you look at the geology of this region, like when you're actually in front of it and you're looking at it, you're seeing a kind of a real, just, it seems very rushed. It seems like you're looking at a disaster area, like all this material was pulled all at once. Like you would expect to see if maybe the earth moved a little faster than the ice did when it shifted, and it kind of had that dragging kind of emotion. And, you know, so with that kind of thought in mind, I started to look at the local bedrock and the deposits, and see if even, you know, the deposits themselves could be identified with local bedrock. And you know, as far as I can tell, here in Sherman, I see a lot of loose material. I see a lot of large material in terms of, you know, some of these boulders are very big, you know, but when I'm looking at the bedrock itself, right nearby, you know, right directly in this area, it really doesn't fit. Like, it doesn't fit at all. Like, it doesn't belong there. I don't see those kinds of veins, those huge veins, they don't exist. And I would expect to see it pretty much throughout the very local area. You know, I wouldn't expect that all the material would have been pulled or been subject to have not left some of this material behind, because there's so much. There's just so much of it. So I'm open to dialogue and debate as always. I just discuss this. People, you know, people teach me new things every day, and so in terms of you know, whether or not it was actually an ice age or that sort of thing, I think ultimately we can agree that a lot of this material was gouged out. It was pulled away from where it was originally. But I don't really see ice melting and dragging material like that. If you look at those glacial melts, it's not doing that. It's not doing that pull. It would have no purpose to. It's just, if anything, it would be a river kind of an activity. As it melted, you would see a river or a flow. But you're not seeing a flow. You're seeing this drag. Not necessarily here. This is a bad example. This is all kind of dropped off here from the local field. But again, I guess you know, Cadillac Mountain would probably be the best example of that I could give. Just kind of get my bearings here, trying to see if I want to bother going that way. It looks kind of thick. So once again, if I see anything interesting, I'll definitely tune in. Talk to you then.